Hello everybody, Mannix here. It is time for another firearm review. This is going to be on the world-renowned Glock 17. This one happens to be the latest version as of mid-2023, the Gen 5. What you get in the package is the gun, 3 17-round magazines, the speed loader right here, and then their barrel cleaning kit, this rod right here, and then this little brush. Aside from that, you get some extra grips or attachments you can add to the handle, but I don't know where they went. I've never used them. I always love the Glock carrying cases. Little finger grooves they have right here match the finger grooves the Glocks have. Oh wait, they got rid of those on the Gen 5. Yes, we'll talk about that in a minute. Barrel length is 4.49 inches. Height, including the magazines, 5.47 inches. Weighs 24.97 ounces with an empty magazine, 22.22 without a magazine. And with a loaded magazine, it's going to weigh somewhere around 33.33 ounces. We have a 26N trigger pull, and the trigger distance is 2.76 inches. You can also attach a flashlight or laser sight, something right here if you wish. So there's a handful of different ways I can introduce and attack this review right here. For starters, we can go up against other guns out there with the same caliber as this one. We can also compare this directly to the other Glock models that have different calibers and different sizes. We can compare this Gen 5 17 directly to the Gen 4 17. As far as the 9mm is concerned, which this is their biggest, most full-size 9mm, aside from their competition model, which has the even longer barrel. So 17 rounds, all 3 magazines you get are double stacked. Pretty large capacity right there. It's a little big, it's a little chunky, just like all Glocks are. Pretty much everything I'm going to say about this gun in particular applies to all of the other Glock models. They're big, chunky handguns, unless you get their more slimmer single-stack magazine models, which are kind of few and far between right now. But I like the way the Glocks look. A lot of people don't. Nobody really thinks Glocks are beautiful. I don't, but I actually don't mind the way they look either. I think they look cool. I think they look like aggressive, functional tools, and that's kind of what these are for. Glocks compared to other handguns out there, regardless of which version, regardless of which variation or generation, you can't argue how dependable, reliable, consistent, and indestructible these guns are. It's a really huge advantage they have over a lot of the other handguns out there. It's difficult to beat the reliability of these handguns. They're polymer, other than of course the slide right here, which is all metal, but the rest of the gun is polymer, so that kind of keeps the weight down a little bit, even for this size. Just like all their Glocks, magazine is polymer. They're just a fixed standard sights right here. I'm not wild about the Glock sights. I love Glocks. I've had a lot of different models. What I don't like about them are their sights. That is one hit I will give them. They're not like bad or anything. They're just, I like fiber optics. I like having adjustable sights, but nah. We just got fixed standard sights in here, whatever. And again, it is a bit chunky. It's not the most ergonomic. It's not uncomfortable by any means. I don't mind it, but it's not a comfortable melt in your hand, oh my god, my fingers feel so good handgun either. It's just kind of middle of the road ergonomics. Functional, it works fine, you know. Not bad, not great as far as ergos are concerned. Not bad, not great as far as aesthetics and looks are concerned. But functionality, reliability, consistency, all those things, again, it checks every other box. These 17 Gen 5s currently go for about $550 as far as I've seen. I think the Gen 4s are around the $500 range. If you want to save maybe $50, you can step down to the Gen 4. The Gen 5s are across the board about $50-$40 more or so, depending on which model. What's the difference between the Gen 5 and the Gen 4? The Gen 5s basically just don't have the finger grooves like the Gen 4s had. They also have these front serrations. The Gen 4s did not. So you have, if you want to rack the slide up here, that can be helpful. Their colors are a little bit different too. This looks more like a glossy black. It's not full on gloss or anything, don't get me wrong, but it looks like a darker, shinier black. The Gen 4s have more of a matte, a little bit more of a flat black. It almost looks like more just like a really dark gray. Very similar. It's really not that big of a deal. One advantage I really like about the Gen 5s, I like the orange inside of the magazines here. I really, really like that. Functionally speaking, I don't think there's any difference whatsoever. The exact same thing, other than the internal of the magazine is orange. Just makes it a little bit more visible, and I'm a huge orange fan. Orange and black looks really cool. Means absolutely nothing, but I still like it anyway. The Gen 4s and all the previous generation Glocks, as far as I know, do not have the orange inside of the stock magazines anyway. Also, the edges are a little bit more tapered, a little bit more rounded. The Gen 4s are just a little bit more blocky, as if this gun couldn't get any more blocky looking. 8% lighter trigger pull on these Gen 5s directly compared to the Gen 4s, so just a little bit easier to squeeze that trigger. Some people argue it feels more like 20% easier. It's debatable. It's just a little bit smoother. It's not that big of a deal, but I do see that as an advantage. And then finally, to top it all off, we have ambidextrous slide releases right here. The Gen 4s only have them on the left side, but the Gen 5s also have it on this side, so lefties rejoice. Directly compare the Gen 5 to the Gen 4, it's better. It's a slight advantage overall, but it's not that big of a deal. Again, aesthetically, it's slightly more rounded. We have serrations up here. We don't have finger grooves. We have the orange inside of the magazines, and then we have an ambidextrous slide release as well as an 8% lighter trigger pull. I'm not going to say you need a Gen 5 instead of a Gen 4. There's just slight advantages slash differences. The finger grooves you could see as a disadvantage. If you liked the finger grooves, if those finger grooves on the Gen 4s fit your fingers just fine, well, you're going to miss them. You don't have them anymore. Now, all Glocks do not have manual safeties on them. They have the safety embedded within the trigger. These have been debated time and time again ever since the dawn of the days the Glocks came out. The whole reason some gun companies did away with the manual safeties is for muscle memory. Let's say that dark and rainy day comes up, you got to pull your gun, you got to shoot someone who's attacking you, trying to murder, rob somebody else, whatever the situation is. And what if you pull this thing out, you try to pull the trigger, and then nothing happens because you forgot the safety was on? The idea is when you pull the trigger, this thing is going to go bang, and it won't go off on its own so easily because that little safety switch is in there. If you don't know how it works, this little safety switch right here needs to be depressed in order for the trigger to pull. If this safety switch is not, and you try to pull the trigger, I'm trying to pull the trigger without pushing the safety switch, it will not pull. So the idea is you got to get a full on grip. A finger, a human finger's got to get in there and pull it in order for it to go off. I still don't see it as the most safe mechanism in the world. I mean, something can still get snagged in there and still pull the trigger. It's just a little bit harder. And again, you don't have an option for a separate safety mechanism. This goes across the board for all Glocks as far as I know. They all have this. I would have liked to have a separate safety mechanism. Your safety mechanisms are a little bit more limited with these Glocks. So I'll just leave it at that. Take that as a good thing, take it as a bad thing. It is what it is. Now let's talk about the caliber, 9mm. Usually the 9mm is directly compared to the other big guys, the 40 S&W and the 45 ACP in the gun world. These are some of the most commonly used handgun rounds. I believe the 9mm is the most commonly used handgun round, I think, amongst law enforcement, the FBI. It's a very good compromise between having very low recoil, being small enough so you can stack them up really high, get a really nice high fat capacity, and to a lesser extent, they're very affordable. These are very cheap rounds compared to the 40 S&W, the 45 ACP, the 10mm, hell, even the 380 auto. These things are cheaper across the board. So it's very easy, very affordable to buy a whole crap load of these and practice with them. So you can get very good with the 9mm, arguably faster than a lot of the other rounds. And then again, on top of that, follow-up shots are going to be a lot easier than other rounds because their recoil's a little lower, and because they're small, you can fit a whole bunch of them in here. 17 rounds. 17! Very impressive. I know the Glock 20, which is the 10mm, you're limited to 15 rounds. The 21, which is their 45 ACP, I believe that one's limited to 12 rounds for a magazine about this size. 17 rounds you get out of these 9mm handguns. The 17 directly compared to a lot of the other Glock models, you get a very high capacity and lower recoil, which means not only follow-up shots are easier, but you have a whole bunch of them. So you're most likely going to be hitting your target, at least after the first shot, if you needed to do so. Some people argue the 9mm not strong enough. I completely disagree, but there's some situations that come up where maybe you'd rather have a 45 or even a 40. 9mm across the board, I think, is a great round for civilians defending themselves against other civilians, non-law abiding civilians who are trying to attack you, who are not wearing body armor or anything like that. Like 9mm plus P hollow points, you'll be all set. 17 rounds. Just like having fun with snap caps. So just to recap here, why would you want a Glock over other handguns for about the same price point? Well, again, the big thing for them is reliability. They're extremely reliable, practically indestructible handguns. It's very unlikely you'll have any issues with these things as far as reliability is concerned. Failures to feed, failures to extract, it's very rare. Unless, of course, your gun's really dry and you haven't oiled it up. Sometimes you can get these out of the package. They might be a bit dry. They might have issues like that, but you just gotta keep them oiled, keep them cleaned. You shouldn't have any issues like that. I have no problem extracting any of the magazines. They're lightweight, even this big ass gun. Maybe if this gun was just a little bit too big for you, you can step down to the Glock 19, which has 2 less rounds, but you have a slightly shorter barrel, slightly shorter handle. That might just be the ticket right there. That might be right in the sweet spot. This is a big, long gun for a 9mm. It's a very high capacity handgun. You have quite a long barrel right there, so that's really gonna help with muzzle velocity. It's gonna help with accuracy. This gun's all about the capacity, man. Just want a shit ton of rounds. You want to be able to shoot them real quickly, not have any issues with follow-up shots because the recoil is very manageable and the gun's very affordable. Not only the gun itself, but the ammo is very affordable. There's a lot of advantages to this gun. It's a full-on combat handgun, I would say. Some people might laugh at that. They might think the 9mm is not strong enough. I beg to differ. But again, if you're going up against people who are wearing armor, or you're trying to shoot through cars or something, yeah, maybe step up to the 10mm, and then there might be certain situations where you want a 45. Yada yada. The 9mm is a very popular round for a good reason. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not saying the other rounds are bad. I'm saying the 9mm certainly has a lot of advantages, though. So for $550, very, very great, reliable handgun for the money. If it's the only handgun you have, that's also a great reason to get the 17. Yeah, it's a little bit big, it's a little bit long for a 9mm, but again, you're getting a very accurate handgun, that extra muzzle velocity, that extra capacity. You'll be all set. If you just had to pick one handgun and only one, I think this is a very good one to go with. It's going to be very affordable to practice with. No obvious flaws I can think of whatsoever, other than it's not a great, amazing, beautiful handgun or anything. It's not the most comfortable. It's comfortable enough. Don't get me wrong. I've held even less comfortable handguns than Glocks, believe it or not. But it's not like melt in your hand. It's chunky and big. But again, we're getting a lot of ammo. We're getting a lot of reliability, durability. So for the price point, I really don't think you can go wrong with the Glocks. You just have to, keep this trigger safety in mind. You don't have a separate safety mechanism. There you have it, the Glock 17 Gen 5.